The pua always come last, huh? Must been nice to have all that free time.
Hayden said that with a look of disdain as I picked up the reservation ticket at the bank. It was the end of the year, and the bank was incredibly busy. Making a reservation in advance was recommended, but my schedule wasn't confirmed until the last minute. Therefore, I had to go there in person. Hayden was proud to be a banker at the main branch. Despite being at work, he proudly boasted to me about his extensive knowledge of money and how much money he had handled so far. I don't have a single good memory of Hayden. It felt ridiculous to deposit my important money in a bank where such a classmate worked, and for once, I spoke up strongly against him. "Cut it out. If you say any more, I'll withdraw everything." Hayden laughed loudly without concern for the people around us and said,
"It's probably just $10,000, right?"
But just then, my number was called. I told the female staff at the counter, "I'm withdrawing all my $500 million. Soon, the branch manager, pale-faced, came to the booth where I was sitting. He sharply reprimanded Hayden, who was confused about what had happened.
Hayden has been terribly rude. Hayden, apologize now."
However, I did not change my mind. I withdrew all my $500 million and deposited it in another bank. This drastically changed Hayden's life, which had been going smoothly until then. My name is Michael Thompson, 32 years old. Although I'm in my 30s, I have no experience working for a company. After graduating high school, I lived a carefree life without working for a while. However, recently, I've started to change my mindset and earn my own money. The one who spoke harshly to me was Hayden Turner. He's also 32 years old. As you might guess, Hayden and I were classmates in middle school. Our encounter at the bank was coincidental, but we weren't close during our middle school days.
"You got some really nice sneakers there. Rich people are different."
Hayden would say that mockingly as he chased after me on the way to school, making it his daily routine. At that time, I was wearing my newly bought sneakers. I chose them for their comfort, as I would use them for the 20-minute walk to and from school and for physical education classes. They weren't cheap, but they weren't so expensive as to warrant his sarcasm. They're nice shoes, but the price is average. There are others wearing the same pair. Indeed, there were many classmates who wore sneakers from the same brand, albeit with slight differences in design. However, Hayden had only one goal. He wanted to outdo me. Back then, Hayden was walking the path of an elite middle school student under the guidance of his enthusiastic parents. He started going to cram school as soon as he entered elementary school. Thanks to studying in advance, he always ranked high in his grades. He was also athletic and not bad-looking. Hayden was quite the standout in our grade. He believed he'd be someone amazing, shining in a glamorous world someday. It's a typical teenage dream, really. Hayden truly believed it from the bottom of his heart. His future dreams, as written in essays, varied over time but always involved high-profile professions, like being a celebrity, professional soccer player, or the president. Hayden longed for a glamorous world and sought attention more than anyone else. On the contrary, I hated standing out above all else. During class, I never raised my hand unless called upon by the teacher. I knew raising my hand showed initiative and could work in favor of my grades. However, I wanted to distance myself from the competitive society and live a peaceful life.
Michael, considering your future, it would be good to get some experience speaking in front of people. If it's too much, at least try raising your hand in class. It's a waste not to given how well you do on written tests.
I was once told this by a teacher who was concerned about my overly passive attitude. Schools these days not only focus on test scores, but also on students' initiative in class. The teacher was worried because, despite my high test scores, my lack of participation was pulling me down. Ms. Nelson, I'm really not worried about my grades. Being the center of attention makes me stressed and sick. Actually, just being in the classroom is all I can manage. I already have my own plan, so please let me keep doing things my way. I honestly told my teacher. It's somewhat well known now, but there are always a few students in a class who struggle with reading social cues, or who are overly sensitive to others' words due to innate brain differences. I was one of them. Trying too hard to fit in could eventually make it impossible for me to even enter the classroom. So, I decided to live at my own pace from the start. My parents, having observed me since I was young, understood what I was trying to say. However, the teacher didn't seem to fully grasp it. Well, fate has its ironies. Despite not seeking it, I ended up in the spotlight. One morning, a middle school student found himself being mobbed by the media as he entered the school gates.
Excuse me, could I interview you for a moment?
Hayden, ever the attention seeker, was unfortunately caught by a journalist from a famous weekly magazine. For Hayden, who loves to be the center of attention, standing in front of a camera was the ultimate opportunity. He was thrilled to be in front of the camera. There was a festival happening near the school soon. Hayden assumed the interview would be about that. However, the questions were completely different from what he expected.
Jack goes to this school, right? What kind of student is he? Is he a central figure in music classes? Does he write or perform songs at school?
The journalist bombarded Hayden with questions. But Hayden was clueless. He had no idea who they were asking about.
Who is Jack? We don't have anyone like that here.
He gave the journalist a surprise for not knowing who that was.
You know Michael, right? It's said that he's Jack.
Hayden was puzzled by the sudden mention of a celebrity's name. Jack was a lyricist and composer. He provided songs to a rapidly rising idol group, but never showed his face. As he was wrapped in mystery, the media was desperate to uncover his identity.
No way. He doesn't have that kind of talent. He barely even sings in music class. Sorry, but I have to go. I'm out of time.
Hayden refused to believe that Jack, the hitmaker stirring up the public, could actually be me. Hayden had always dreamed of a glamorous world and yearned for social success more than anyone else. What if I had already realized that dream in the world of music ahead of him? If that was true, it would be nothing but a disgrace for him. That day, an emergency assembly was called for all students in the gym. It was clear that the commotion was about the media prowling around the school building. The principal first explained the situation.
Today has been difficult with all the questions. Those interviewed might guess, but this is all because of the reports about Jack. Your homeroom teachers will give you more details.
Prompted by the principal, my homeroom teacher took the stage. She seemed bewildered by the sudden turn of events, looking utterly exhausted. She looked as if she hadn't slept at all.
Recently, a popular idol group's song provider was revealed by a weekly magazine to be Michael, a student in my class. His picture was taken secretly. Michael has only been known as Jack, keeping his identity private. As you know, his hits have been very successful. The search for his real identity has intensified, leading to public disclosure. This situation might continue for a while. Please don't accept any interviews. Even small comments can become a big deal. Just say that the school has banned interviews, and you'll be fine. Also, you might have many questions for Michael, but he's very tired now. Please give him some space.
There was one exception. That is Hayden.
Are you really providing songs for those idols? That group is part of a major agency, and you have no connection to them at all.
During lunch break, Hayden would come over to me and start talking at me rapidly. A seemingly talentless classmate had suddenly become famous. Moreover, this person is celebrated as a genius brimming with innate talent. Hayden, always wanting to stand out, must have felt jealous. It was becoming difficult for him to maintain his composure. Sorry, I can talk about the details. I don't even know what to do myself, so please give me a break.
Come on, don't act all high and mighty. We're classmates, aren't we? How can you prove you wrote those songs? The lyrics deeply express a girl's inner feelings. There's no way you could write something like that. Are you using a ghostwriter or something?
I was seen as a nondescript student. I understood why Hayden might think that way. The songs I wrote for the popular idol group express the emotional turmoil and conflicts of teenage girls. It would be hard for anyone, not just Hayden, to imagine that I was the one who wrote the lyrics for such songs. The idol group I provided songs for was initially a local act, quietly doing their thing. There was a time when they called for song submissions to enrich their repertoire of original music. As someone who enjoyed composing music as a hobby, I applied on a whim at my parents' suggestion. Before I knew it, my submission had made it to the final selection, and astonishingly, was chosen to be released as a single. It must have resonated with the times. Before I knew it, the idol group had risen to national fame, carrying several songs I had created. I provided about 10 songs, all of which became major hits. Some were even chosen for commercial jingles. The fan base was mainly teenagers, but the songs also resonated with people over 40, reminding them of their bittersweet youth. Everyone would probably be disappointed to learn that the person who released such songs into the world struggles with social interactions and lacks any semblance of sociability. I always wanted to stay out of the spotlight and not ruin the song's image, which is why I continued to provide music anonymously just for this idol group. You can think I'm using a ghostwriter if you want. I don't care who gets credited. I'd rather someone else take over. My indifference towards being part of the glamorous probably irked him even more. From that moment, Hayden suddenly began to adopt a condescending attitude towards me. The worst of his attitude came during the unforgettable preparations for the cultural festival.
Michael, with all those hits you've made, you must be a great singer. You should do the solo for the choir.
He said that, knowing fully well I wasn't good at it. I'm tone deaf. You sing much better than me, Hayden. Hayden indeed had a good singing voice. He's the type who shines when performing songs at gatherings. Normally, he would be the first to volunteer whenever there was an opportunity to sing in front of others. However, that year, Hayden was determined to make me sing. Perhaps because I was recognized as a genius who produced hit songs, he wanted to embarrass me by having me perform a song off-key in front of others. Ultimately, our music teacher caught wind of the commotion and decided to remove the solo part. Even after this incident, I continued to write songs for a while. I knew the 5 members had been dreaming of entertainment industry success since their local idol days, diligently practicing after school. My songs resonated with many because they reflected the members' innermost feelings. I didn't want to step back just because my information had been leaked. However, the situation suddenly changed. The idol group ended up disbanding. It was a decision resulting from various factors intertwined with their fame. Being primarily middle schoolers, they had reached the age to consider high school, and with national recognition, their freedom to act and speak diminished. With success came losses. The more famous they became, the more conflicted they felt about continuing as they were. The management considered keeping the group name but changing the members. However, longtime fans resisted the total member change, unable to accept it. The complications arising from my role as a songwriter, impacting my middle school life, contributed to the decision for the members to graduate in a final live performance, leading to the group's disbandment. The media couldn't possibly know the detailed circumstances. After the disbandment was announced, rumors spread that Jack had hit a slump, unable to produce songs as before, forcing the group to disband. I didn't refute these claims. Afterwards, I stopped making music. Regardless of the reason, being just a normal middle school student again was what made me happiest. Hayden seemed to be the most pleased with my change in circumstances. Despite never being close, he'd now eagerly approach me.
The entertainment industry isn't easy to succeed in, right? You can't just make money that easily. Plus, you're going to a part-time high school. What are you going to do there now that you've lost your songwriting job?
I've always wanted to go to the part-time high school. It has nothing to do with songwriting.
Don't make excuses. A loss is a loss. Just admit it. It's too late for entrance exams now, right? Poor thing, you've really messed up your life.
Hayden looked at me triumphantly, completely misunderstanding the situation. I get stressed in group settings and wanted to live at my own pace. So, I just chose a part-time high school. Hayden assumed I chose part-time schooling, hoping for a songwriting career. Hayden, who had attended cram school since he was young, was set to attend the second-best public high school locally. Incidentally, Hayden had to give up on attending the top-ranked high school because, unfortunately, his academic abilities fell short. A girl from our middle school got into that top school. That shifted Hayden's jealousy towards her, freeing me from his attention. The part-time high school was home to students from various generations and backgrounds. While the annoyances of group life were not entirely absent, I managed to lead a reasonably fulfilling student life. As this new life became routine, Hayden gradually faded from my memory. Over a decade later, I unexpectedly encountered Hayden again. This happened when I visited the main branch of the bank to withdraw some of the money from my account. Both Hayden and I were in our 30s by then. The atmosphere had changed quite a bit since our middle school days. However, Hayden's thick arched eyebrows and his somewhat disdainful attitude remained the same as before. As for me, perhaps because I was dressed in a casual, almost student-like manner, Hayden recognized me right away. He approached me with a triumphant look on his face.
The poo are always last, huh? You must have plenty of time.
I was speechless while holding the reservation ticket at the bank. That's not the kind of comment a bank employee should make. Despite understanding his position, Hayden spoke softly, ensuring others couldn't hear. The bank was bustling at year-end. There were plenty account openings, deposits, withdrawals, and consultations. It was especially crowded at the investment advice counter. People wanted to grow their winter bonuses or secure funds for retirement, and bank employees suggested investing after seeing savings account balances. They were perhaps trying to guide customers through financial products. Individuals who appeared to be bank employees were stationed throughout the place, one of whom was Hayden. Given the congestion during the end-of-year and New Year period, the bank had recommended making reservations online. Due to work constraints, I couldn't finalize my schedule in time, so I decided to visit the bank without an appointment.
Here's a number ticket. Just follow the order, and that'll be fine.
I ended up making a face that clearly showed my annoyance. Unexpectedly, Hayden began to talk about his career. He must be trying to assert his dominance. He boasted about himself with great enthusiasm, though no one had asked him to.
I never thought I'd make it from a branch to a main bank employee. With so many multinational corporations around here, I often have to communicate in multiple languages. It turns out there aren't many people who are quick-witted, fluent in more than one language, and have extensive financial knowledge like me, even in a bank this size.
He bragged about his abilities even while on duty. According to Hayden, he had also built a decent personal financial portfolio.
Well, my financial assets are only about $1 million. I could save more, but I end up spending it on annual overseas trips. I consider it an investment in experience.
I had visited the bank that day with the sole intention of withdrawing a portion of cash from my account. I had only opened the account because an acquaintance asked me to. I had absolutely no emotional attachment to the bank. Furthermore, I discovered that a classmate, in whom I had not a shred of trust, was working at the main branch. Being treated with such disdain made the idea of keeping an account there seem utterly foolish. "I'll withdraw everything," I said that, causing Hayden to burst into laughter. Suddenly, he blurted out loudly,
"It's probably just $10,000, right?"
His words drew the attention of other customers. My embarrassment peaked at that point. Fortunately, it was then my turn. I informed the staff at the counter, "I'll be withdrawing all $500 million and closing my account with this bank today." The female staff's complexion changed. She tried to persuade me not to close my account. However, my resolve was firm. Sensing this, the staff went to the back. The branch manager, pale-faced, approached my booth. He was urging a confused Hayden behind me.
Hayden has been extremely rude. Now, what are you doing? Apologize as well.
Even if you say so, have I caused any problem?
Don't you understand? Do you not know who Mr. Thompson is? He's a private investor who influences the Japanese economy. We're his main bank, holding $500 million, and you.
The branch manager and Hayden's direct supervisor were unaware that a mid-career bank employee could be so disrespectful to a customer. Detailed client information hadn't been shared with Hayden, who had just transferred from a branch. The manager, along with Hayden, apologized repeatedly. But I didn't change my mind. I transferred all $500 million to another bank with trustworthy employees. Hayden offered to apologize in person several times, but I declined. About half a year passed without seeing Hayden. Suddenly, it seems Hayden was severely reprimanded by the upper management for losing a $500 million deposit. After closing the account, there was no need to speak with anyone from that bank again. Despite feeling sorry for him, I ignored Hayden's calls by pretending not to be home. I never thought I'd see Hayden again. However, that wasn't the case. A few months after our encounter at the bank, I once again ran into Hayden by chance. The place of our reunion was an ordinary pub, quite unfit for someone with Hayden's elitist consciousness. I was there to attend a certain celebration party. Arriving earlier than planned, I entered the pub intending to wait in a reserved private room. That's when I noticed a man drinking a highball at a corner counter seat. It was Hayden. I hesitated about whether to approach him. At that moment, Hayden looked in my direction.
Aren't you Michael?
"Long time no see. Drinking alone here. Doesn't seem like you." The moment I saw Hayden's face, I was at a loss for words. His face was unshaven. He probably hadn't visited a barber in a long while. His hair was grown out and disheveled. The confident expression that once filled his face was now completely gone.
Seeing me now, you must be surprised at how much I've changed. You're probably thinking I look too disheveled to be a banker.
Hayden hinted at his current state from the smell of alcohol, indicating he had been drinking since noon. Not knowing exactly what situation Hayden was in, I found myself unable to say anything and just silently stared at his face. Then, Hayden downed his highball in one gulp, glared at me, and asked in a rough voice,
"Why did you have $500 million in your bank account that time? Sure, you released hit songs in middle school, but after the idol group disbanded, you haven't been involved in music at all, right? And you went to a part-time high school. With that kind of educational background, you shouldn't have had the chance to get your hands on $500 million. How did that even happen?"
Hayden's hand, clutching the empty glass, was trembling slightly. His tone was laden with frustration, jealousy, sadness, despair, and regret. My honest preference was to keep my personal matters private. However, seeing Hayden possibly on the verge of breaking down, I was worried for him. What Hayden needed was to accept the gap between his ideals and reality, and acknowledging his limits while moving forward. I decided to share my story. As you know, I was involved in music production in middle school. I'm not making music anymore. However, I still have a decent income. The songs released back then are occasionally covered even now. They're sung in events and used as background music in TV shows. Thankfully, I receive a substantial amount in royalties every year. I'm terrible at socializing and gave up on the idea of working for a company. So, after graduating high school, I've been living quietly on those royalties. I can say I work as hard as most people here, but in exchange, I've been volunteering. My parents were worried about my weak social connections and suggested I resume music activities. But, having been burnt by the music industry turmoil in middle school, I couldn't bring myself to enter the entertainment world again. Then, through acquaintances, my parents introduced me to a volunteer organization.
This organization supports children with disabilities or those who struggle in school. They recruit college student volunteers to teach them and organize events to help them participate in society.
I was welcomed by Carla White. She's an 80-year-old woman, active in volunteer work. Carla had a son with disabilities who passed away in his 30s after a long illness. Wanting to help children facing difficulties, she and her husband founded the organization in their 50s, using their personal funds. I found myself involved in the unfamiliar world of volunteer work by chance. Initially, I was just participating out of consideration for my parents. However, a request from Carla changed my perspective entirely.
Michael, you can write lyrics and compose music, right? If it's possible, could you create a song that everyone participating in our activities can sing together? We'd like a simple, positive song that even children with disabilities can easily sing.
I hadn't composed any music since stepping away from the music world. Being manipulated by adults and bearing the brunt of jealousy had made life difficult. Attempting to compose brought back painful memories. But I thought a theme song for the volunteer group, sung among ourselves, would be fine. Agreeing, I spent a month completing a certain song. Before starting volunteer activities, everyone began singing the song I created. Its melody line was simple, with little fluctuation, something anyone could seemingly create. However, I realized the song I created played a role in uniting people of different generations, genders, and family backgrounds. Gradually, I began to spend more time composing music, playing piano accompaniments at choir competitions organized by the volunteer group, and creating music for stages and commercials.
Your volunteer activities and that $500 million in the account, how do they connect? And why can you create music? Did you apprentice under a musician? Despite becoming so famous, why did you quit making music? I can't understand anything you do or think.
Hayden, dreaming of a glamorous world, was understandably curious about how I succeeded in music and came to possess $500 million. Ever since I was little, I couldn't blend in with groups and often found myself alone. My dad, worried about me, bought me a keyboard. It started as a toy, but soon I was creating my own music. Before I knew it, my room was filled with instruments and recording equipment. I became so engrossed in making music that I'd stay up late into the night. Music wasn't about fame for me, it was a way to overcome loneliness. As my music became known, I ended up more isolated in class. The adults who approached me were untrustworthy, making me feel even lonelier, so I withdrew. Despite the unfortunate ending, I was grateful for the steady stream of royalties.
And that resulted in $500 million.
Half of it came from investments. The other half was donated by Carla before she passed. Carla White had died of old age a few years ago. Her biggest concern had always been the volunteer organization she started with her husband in memory of their son. Carla's husband was a well-known landowner in the area. As a result, Carla inherited a substantial amount of assets. However, she had no children to inherit these assets. Therefore, before her passing, she designated me as the head of the organization and donated the majority of her assets to it. Right now, we're constructing an educational exchange facility to increase opportunities for children with disabilities to excel in society. $250 million was from Carla, and $250 million was my contribution. This $500 million is more about the sentiment than the money. All the hardships, worries, conflicts, and of course, the unspeakable joys and sorrows are ingrained in it. After hearing my story, Hayden looked down silently. He was perhaps overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events.
Michael, what's happening? It's time.
A woman in her early 30s called me from the reserved private room. Today marked a pause in the continuous meetings for the construction of the educational exchange facility. Therefore, we decided to have a drinking party with the members of the volunteer organization. Actually, she's my wife, a former member of that idol group, who has supported Carla's activities since her teens. She became famous as an idol, but always felt something was missing. She says she's most fulfilled now. Fame doesn't necessarily fulfill everything, nor does having money guarantee you can have everything. Hayden's measure of happiness was always about whether he could stand above others. However, I wanted him to realize that this isn't necessary. As time pressed on, I left Hayden with a "see you" and moved on. Later, I gradually got the facility connecting disabled children with society on track. Our learning support activities for non-attending children garnered media attention, featuring on TV and in magazines. Despite this, I remained uncomfortable with the limelight. So I had my wife, acting as my assistant, handle the interviews in my place. I learned about Hayden's whereabouts at a middle school class reunion. After leaving the bank due to our incident, he had been unemployed for a while but had recently started job hunting. Surprisingly, he was applying mainly to pub chains, not aiming for a major corporate shift. During his unemployed days, encouragement from various people he met while drinking at pubs helped him regain the will to restart his life. He aspired to create a space of comfort for those struggling to find their place. He hopes to work at a pub as training towards that goal. Hayden seemed to have lost his fixation on being an elite, standing above others. Although Hayden and I originally had opposite dispositions, the places we find ourselves in now might be surprisingly close. The day we can share our dreams might not be too far off. I felt I might have found a future best friend, a notion I thought would never apply to myself,